Greetings all, BW here with the fourth video in our deep dive on the Marvel character Marrow. There's not much preamble other than to just say that I do have a mug of water, so I'm not coughing as much as I was last time. So let's get right into it with this issue. I talked about, or I mentioned it last time, X-Men Unlimited number 22. The title is Cat and Mouse. And we open from Marrow's perspective. She's recalling the first time that she remembers, quote, seeing what a human looked like. And it was on a romance novel that had like floated down into the sewers. Oops. Well, it had floated down into the sewers. And she's recalling this while she's watching Kitty Pryde sleeping. She's kind of like on her windowsill. She remarks how beautiful Kitty is and that she deserves what comes next. And then she throws a dead rat onto her pillow. And Kitty just wakes up and screams, Marrow! Like it would be anybody else, right? Like, obviously it's going to be Marrow. Maybe she's done this before. Marrow taunts her back. She mentions a terrorist planting explosives. Marrow does mention that she happened to notice some just kind of casually terrorists that were planting explosives and while she was hunting rats, like she's kind of like just they're bickering back and forth, they're taunting back and forth, right? And she just kind of mentions it offhand, but of course that's like a big deal, and she of course doesn't see how it's terribly important, but she ends up sharing the information with the rest of the team. They all kind of gather down in the kitchen. Some of the X-Men, some of the team are hesitant to trust Marrow, but ultimately they can't afford not to. Wolverine thinks he knows who might be behind it, and so they agree to go ahead and take action. Storm actually puts Marrow into a leadership role. The team breaks up into two parts, and Marrow leads one of them. And she's actually in the same group as Kitty, and puts an arm around Kitty and says, hey, we can be buddies. To which Kitty responds, can I be on the other team? Marrow offers some walkie-talkies that she stole to use as communication. Again, this is feeling the repercussions of Zero Tolerance and Bastion kind of taking a lot of their equipment and emptying the mansion and stuff. So Marrow has some walkie-talkies that she stole, and there's some pushback on that because she stole them, and then she says, give me a break. I'm going to get lectured on taking things that aren't mine by a pickpocket, meaning Gambit, and meaning Storm, and a member of the Thieves Guild, meaning Gambit. And it's like, okay, point taken. So Wolverine, Marrow, Kitty, and Kurt are walking through the tunnels when Marrow, who is bearing a torch, explains how she gets back and forth between Westchester and Manhattan so quickly. She uses shortcuts through the tunnels, fair enough, and she uses garbage sweeper trains, which is exactly what it sounds like, a train on old tracks in the sewer. Rogue, Gambit, who does comment on the Morlock massacre, Colossus, who Marrow yells at for leaving his radio on, and Storm are using a subway to converge on the point where Flag Smasher and Ultimatum were spotted. So that's who Wolverine is thinking it is. And I mentioned the part about Gambit and Colossus there sort of parenthetically because, as I said last time, I think it was last time, it's never really clear if Marrow ever learns Gambit's role in the Mutant Massacre. That I recall, she never brings it up. But here, Gambit mentions it, and then like in the next panel, Colossus says something, and Marrow comments on how his radio is open, like he's got the button depressed. So did she just hear Gambit? I don't know. Again, I don't think it's ever clarified that I can recall. Anyway, so they converge on the point where Flag Smasher was, where Marrow had seen them. She again remarks how this really isn't their business and that humans should just blow each other up. They reach a fork in the line, the subway line, from where she spotted the bomb, and then they divide up further into pairs. So it's Kurt and Logan, Nightcrawler and Wolverine go off, and then Marrow and Kitty. And originally that's not how it's divvied up, but then Kitty says, Kurt, if you don't mind, I'll go with Marrow down the five line. I'd hate to split up you and your drinking buddy. They are observed, however, the four of them, by a masked figure who is Flag Smasher. If you don't know the character, this is your first glimpse in this issue. So Marrow is actually pretty professional on the walkie-talkie for once, and which Kitty points out. And she tries to talk to Marrow. Quote, I don't know what you're trying to prove by coming with me. It's not going to work. Marrow says that to her. And then Kitty responds, I'm not trying to prove anything, Marrow. I'm just... You're not the first new girl in this club, you know? Jubilee filled that role before you, and I was there before her. Maybe she and I were young and naive, but the X-Men helped us believe that humans and mutants could live together. I know you're not convinced, and I'm wondering why. Why I can't give you what they gave me. I'm just trying to understand you. And then Marrow says, a beautiful girl like you would never understand. And Kitty's kind of taken by this and says, what did you say? And then the conversation kind of continues as they walk. Marrow thinks that Kitty never had it rough because she can pass for normal upworld, but Kitty pushes back and literally shoves her. And Marrow says, you heard me, Pride. You can't understand the way I see humans because you're pretty much one yourself. You grew up with them, you think like them, and you look like them. You fit in with the rest of the beautiful flesh bags, and they've blinded you to what they truly are. And Kitty says, how dare you? You think I've had it easy just because I look human? I've watched my friends die at their hands, you presumptuous little Morlock. And get over your obsession with beauty, Marrow. You think the fact you don't look like them gives you license to hate all humans? I've got some hard news for you, sister. You're not as ugly as you think you are. You're actually... And she gets interrupted. Marrow says, don't say it. Not another syllable, Pride. Save your hollow nice words for the next new girl. I'll only mention here that this... we've seen this message before, right? I think this is what Sam was kind of getting at in the park at the end of the issue where Marrow was kind of running around and Callisto and Storm were tracking her down. Sam was kind of essentially saying, you think you're the only one who's experienced loss, right? So that point is being driven home again. But they're interrupted by some radio chatter. Logan and Kurt were in a skirmish with Ultimatum, so they found them. Marrow says it's going to take too long to reach them. But Kitty suggests phasing through the walls, and then they take each other's hand to do so. And it's this little moment. When asked if she's ever seen the movie Ghost, so like as they're traveling, Kitty asks Marrow's like, how's this going to work? How are we going to get there? And Kitty asks, have you ever seen the movie Ghost? And Marrow replies, romances make me want to kill myself. They leap into the train that has a bomb on it, and they are surrounded by armed guards. Gambit and Storm bust into the car, though, and Gambit blasts someone who is about to shoot Marrow, and she says she owes him one. And he replies to her, Cher, you don't ever owe me a thing. Right? So does she know? Does she not know? It's never clear. The rest of the team shows up. The baddies are subdued, and Rogue ends up stopping the train. Marrow gives their exact whereabouts, and Logan mentions that it's under the UN building. But Marrow doesn't buy that, and she takes off. She says, quote, you guys are doing just what the meatbags want you to do. And Kitty runs off after her. Marrow explains to Kitty that she's going to, quote, play the hero, like she's supposed to, and find the real bomb. And she says it's always about money. Quote, I've read a few books, you know. I'm not as stupid as you'd like to think I am. Why would a guy who wants one united world blow up a place that's trying to do the same thing? Come on, girlie. You know what all flat skins are really interested in. And that was kind of like the summary, or not the summary, but that's kind of what the team had surmised until then. And Marrow kind of has an intuition that they're not there to blow up the UN. They hitch a ride on a train, and they walk and they talk, and so they're traveling. There's a quote here, and Marrow says, you think you understand humans better than the other X-Men. People who have spent their whole lives surrounded by them. And Kitty says, no, I understand humans better because... reversing. That's Kitty saying that. You think you understand humans better than the other X-Men. People who have spent their whole lives surrounded by them. And Marrow says, no, I understand humans better because I haven't spent my whole life surrounded by them. Listen, you can't see the forest for the trees, Pride. When you live your whole life apart from something, like I did, you get perspective. I go to see humans for what they really are. Right now, we're under that place where all the suits buy and sell stuff all day. And Kitty is kind of like, where? You mean Wall Street? And Marrow says, take a good look at human nature, Pride. And they spot Flag Smasher with a bomb. And Marrow leaps in, attacks. Kitty saves her. And there's a quote, old man Logan teach you that move. But Flag Smasher says that it's too late. Marrow doesn't believe him. But Kitty is considering phasing with the bomb. She's like kind of calculating, can she control the blast? If she phases with the bomb, does the blast also phase and not hurt anybody? But Marrow knocks her out. And then after she knocks Kitty out, she gets right up in Flag Smasher's face. I love it. She goes, I thought we could use some time alone. Look at your stupid mask. You're a child, which is great line because everyone calls her a kid. I think I've pointed that out before. And she sticks one of her daggers up under his mask and pulls it and rips the mask off. Yeah, I thought so. That's why you hide your face, isn't it? Chiseled beauty. You know you don't deserve it. You people don't deserve to look like that. And he asks her, Aren't you going to get us out of here? The bomb. And she replies, you're not going anywhere. And then she stabs one of her bone knives through his shoulder into the bomb, like pins him to the bomb. Ouch, that's in deep. Looks like you're staying here with your toy, pal. You can defuse the bomb if you know how. I don't care. Kill as many flesh bags as you want. I won't lose my sleep. And he says that she's supposed to be a hero. But she responds, says who, human? I'm just another ugly mutant looking out for my own. Later, pretty boy. Later on, Kitty wakes up and Marrow is actually proven to be right. Quote, you just left him there? Innocent people are going to die because of you. You have to go back. And Marrow says, there's no time. Bomb's set to go off in 30 seconds. But it won't. He'll defuse it. No, he won't. You don't know a thing about humans. 5, 4, 3, 2. Hate to say I told you so, but... And then Kitty just kind of calls her a stupid lucky sewer rat. And then she ends up passing out again. And there's a train approaching. And Marrow tries to wake her up, saying, Pussycat, wake up. Pride. We have to go untouchable here. Kitty. And it's like all caps. Come on, please. And then sort of like lower. I'm sorry, Kitty. I'm so sorry. And she cradles her. But Logan shows up. And it's not super clear whether he's showing up and rescuing her from an oncoming train, or if the oncoming train was the garbage train, was the rest of the team in their own train or in the garbage train. It's not super clear, but either way, it was a moment that was going to be death and now isn't. And he just says, let's go home. So later on the garbage train back, Marrow is thinking back and she says, quote, look at all the pretty people. They played at being heroes today, did everything they could until the decoy bomb harmlessly fizzled out. I used to live with ugly people in these ugly tunnels. That was a long time ago. She still looks beautiful. And Kitty is actually sleeping up on Marrow's lap. Her chestnut hair, those hazel eyes. Me, there's a new bone growing out of my cheek and through my nose. In the end, I guess we all get what we deserve. And that kind of echoes the in the beginning when she's in the windowsills, she's talking about Kitty's hair and Kitty's eyes. And that's how the issue ends. So this is Vaughn, which is a writer that we haven't seen. And I just love this issue so much. Interestingly, the cover has Marrow with horns, but that's not what she looks like in this book, which is we can just chalk it up to the legacy of the inconsistency. Not the first time, definitely not the last time that we're going to see this. I thought it was interesting, though, that on the cover, and then also I think in the issue, in a couple of the panels, the close-up panels, Kitty still has her Star of David necklace, the one that Kurt bought her on the street, which is cool. Couple other things worth mentioning. Marrow says that the first time she saw a human was on a romance cover, so maybe she was actually born in the sewers, and maybe not. We'll get another clarification on that later. She does say, I think it's interesting that she does say romances make me want to kill myself, while she's actually kind of being in a romance story. This is one of the first sources that people point to when they want to discuss Marrow's sexuality, and that's fine. We're going to talk more about that later. Given what we know about both context and the characters involved, I kind of see this story framed more as just like this awkward budding concept of romance. It's not necessarily anything more than a friendship at this point, but there's other discoveries kind of going on. Kitty is kind of showing Marrow that there is more to people than just appearance, and Marrow's kind of taking that lesson to heart. The title of this issue is Cat and Mouse, and while a mousy person, so Cat is obviously Kitty, Pride, right? And so Mouse would respond to Marrow, who in fact opens the issue by throwing rats and gets called a rat. While a mousy person is generally seen as shy or timid, I think if you wanted to stretch that definition, it might, if we're on that romance vibe, it's kind of like prudish, it fits Marrow, not prudish like out of ignorance, like naive, and that kind of fits Marrow more than she'd like to admit sometimes. And she's kind of naive and guarded about this topic of beauty, which connects to the romance. But anyway, we can't skip past this issue, though, without talking about who initiates the whole story in the first place, which is Marrow. For all her bluff and all of her bluster, she could have done nothing, right? And we've said this before too. So instead of doing nothing, she is the one who instigates it. And it's almost like she tells them because she knows something needs to be done, right? But she doesn't want to be seen as the person who cares. We're like, oh, yeah, I saw some bombs down there. Yeah, no big deal. Oh, you guys want to do something about it? Oh, you're such a pain. Oh, I guess I'll save the day. Like, she's so reluctant. Anyway, so since the whole thing is told from her perspective, we get some really interesting insight as to her thoughts on everyone else as well. She has like little not pen names, nicknames, pet names, I guess is what I was going for there, for different characters. And overall, it's just a great read, some great zingers, some solid Marrow content. I don't think it was intentional, but the sign on Marrow's bedroom door that she carved in, "This Way to a Dark Ride," I feel like that would have been a really great alternate title instead of Cat and Mouse. Like if it had been like Dark Ride or something, it would have been a cool callback. But I know that the Unlimited issues are kind of like side stories. But it is the whole issue. It's not, I had mentioned, I think previously, that the X-Men Unlimited oftentimes are short stories. This was not a short story. This was, it takes the whole issue. So very awesome issue, excellent Marrow material, and definitely one of the high points in what we're covering. And in contrast to that, we have the Magneto War. So this is Davis writing the story in Nicieza, and again, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but I'll be consistent in my incorrect pronunciation. So Davis is on the story, Nicieza is on the script, and the mansion is attacked at night by the acolytes, and Cortez touches Marrow, which causes her bones to grow out of control. He like amplifies mutant powers, which is interesting that we talked before about when her power was dampened, she had a lot of pain. This is the opposite of that. And so you might think, well, so how does it work when her bones grow out of control uncontrollably? Does her healing factor scale up with that? Presumably it does. Storm notices and says, "By the Bright Lady, if you've hurt Marrow," but Kitty phases her out of her sea urchin-like bone formation. They kind of just had her bones come out almost like radially from her, so she ends up looking like she's trapped in a sea urchin shell of some kind. Kitty phases her out, which is, "Hang on, Marrow," she says, "I'm going to try and phase you through your bone cage." And Marrow says, "How can even Miss Perfect manage to do that?" And Kitty explains this wonderful use of her power by phasing your body, but not your bone protrusions, and basically amputating them off you. And Marrow says, "Guess I should be glad you haven't got the stones to be nasty." And Kitty says, "I wouldn't bet your life on it." To which Marrow says, "Ooh, the rose has thorns too." I didn't know that Kitty could be that selective about her powers, but sure. That's how she saves Marrow. And that's really the only Marrow content. And the Magneto War itself is actually part of the bigger story. The other bigger stories, this is kind of the culmination of that. But as a result, Marrow ends up taking a backseat for a lot of it. So this is Alan Davis on story, Nicieza on script, as I mentioned. It's the beginning of this big event about the return of Magneto. And Joseph is involved. Lots of extra things going on. It's interesting to think how Marrow's musculature, I had this thought while I was rereading the issue, how do her muscles work with the bone growths coming out? But mutant powers, who knows? Whatever. Just kind of, it's interesting seeing different authors' takes. I think I've said that before. I'm probably going to say it again. It's just interesting to see, like, with her bones growing all out from like a central point, but that's not really how it works. Like she has some growing out of her shoulders and some growing out of her knees and some growing out of her back. They don't all come from a central point, but I guess like artistically it was the choice they made. Okay, sure, fine. So that is its own issue, the Magneto War. And now we're getting into Uncanny X-Men number 366. Same people, Davis and Nicieza. Here the acolytes are generally wreaking havoc, like in general, out and about in the community, and we opened the whole team in flight aboard their Aurora jet. Their transportation is also kind of wonky these days, again as a result of everything that's happened. They're all strategizing. The team is strategizing about how best to deal with the situation, and Marrow says this. She says, "All I've heard since I joined was how dangerous Magneto was to everything we're supposed to stand for. So how are we doing our jobs by letting his Phoebes," and that is what it says, and I have no idea why. It's probably a typo. No idea what it means. She says, "So how are we doing our jobs by letting his Phoebes go postal on the flat scans?" So suddenly she's showing concern. And Kitty says to Kurt, hearing this, she says to Kurt, "The rookie asks the tough ones, Kurt." And he replies, "Yeah, Kitty, and silence is our answer." It's kind of like, oh, so Marrow's kind of starting to buy into this, but you've got nothing to back it up, right? Magneto uses his powers. He lifts up his base out of the snow. I think it was hidden in the snow. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that correctly. But at any rate, he does this giant magneto beam. Experts are describing it as something that happened 20 months ago when Magneto was responsible, which we know is true from some of what we've read when he was affecting the... actually, maybe we didn't even cover it because it wasn't a huge piece of the story. But anyway, Ferris, who is his robot, explains to the UN, like as an ambassador, that an electromagnetic wave will continue to disrupt all technology on Earth until they all agree to Magneto's demand for a mutant haven. He wants a place that mutants can call their own. And then as a result of that EM wave, the X-Men who are traveling to Antarctica, I think it's Ellesmere Island, as a result of that, they crash. Their ship crashes, and they are presumed dead by the acolytes who are also there, but their ship is not going down because Magneto is in charge of the magnetic wave, magnetic pulse, and they're okay. But we actually know that they survived the crash. Sipping on water, good idea. So we have Davis and Nicieza again. We see Marrow with some shoulder pads, which is kind of a cool look for her. A bit of an updated look all around, but nothing too drastic. She is definitely one of the team, with the teamwork and the banter and everything. She's definitely one of the crew now. And that's it. That's my notes. Moving on to the next issue, which is X-Men 86, which sort of continues the story. Same writers, Davis and Nicieza. We learn that Joseph is some kind of clone made by Astra. This is a character who is ostensibly part of the original Evil Brotherhood of Mutants, though I don't know the name, so it may be sort of a bit of a retcon thing. And there's no connection between her and Sinister or Sugarman or Dark Beast that I can tell. Excuse me. There we go. Anyway, so crashed in the snow on Ellesmere Island, Marrow wonders in sort of an exposition box, quote, is fighting against mutants to save humans who hate mutants really worth dying for? There seems to be a flashback to 2 months ago when someone named Huxley is contacted and brought from Genosha by S.H.I.E.L.D. for reasons that have to do with Magneto. There's a nuclear explosion at Magneto's base where he's doing all this. Some Russian missiles, special Russian missiles that kind of get through, and they're actually nukes. And so when he tries to like deflect them, they blow up, they detonate. And the X-Men, who it said they are 70 miles away, they have like, I think it says 2 minutes. They have a brief moment to take cover as best they can in the snow. So they start throwing up some impromptu shelters as best they can. Marrow says, this is ridiculous. We can't just stay here. And Wolverine says that there's no choice. And she responds, Wolvie, which is, she calls him Wolvie twice in this issue. Wolvie, you're not giving up, are you? Does your X-Men manual say to do that? But the issue actually ends with the two of them embracing, which is kind of nice. And along with the others, behind some very impromptu shielding, like it looks like it's just pieces of ice. And he responds to her, and this is how the issue ends. Hardest lesson to learn, girl. Sometimes the bad guys win. So, like I said, my notes just say, I'm not really sure about the finer points of the main story, but it's certainly dramatic. And it is. It's dramatic reading. I just don't care about what's going on in the rest of it. And Marrow is just kind of a background character on the team. Because the story really isn't about any of the X-Men, honestly, at all. It's a Magneto story. All right, so the story continues in Uncanny X-Men 367. The team is attacked by the Acolytes. It's kind of revealed that they weren't going to, and then Xavier kind of telepathically prompted them to attack so that they would land their ship because the X-Men ship is busted. Marrow leaps at one of them who attacks Storm, and she says, hey, no one's allowed to hurt the Wind Rider but me. And then we read of her, a survivor of the underground mutant society of Morlocks, Marrow is a reluctant member of the X-Men. Her entire life had been a struggle for survival, so to her, using her bone extrusions, it's hyphenated, to fight for a dream of coexistence between humans and mutants seems almost trite. But whether she agrees with their goals or not, for now, the X-Men are her family, and she'll let no one take that away. So Wolverine stops her short from the attack, though, and all this does seem to be a ruse to get the Acolytes to exit their ship. So if you defeat the ones that are outside the ship, the others might flee. Like, that's kind of the concern. So you want to keep the battle going so the others join and exit their ship. And then I just have Joseph and Magneto fight, etc. There's action going on in the Citadel thing where Magneto is with Joseph and Astra and Magneto and whatever. This is Davis and Nicieza again because it's part of the same event. Not much Marrow, but it is interesting to see how new writers use exposition to pick and choose what parts of her history matter. And then this is why I notes say, remember Gene Nation? Everybody seems to talk about the Morlocks, but they don't all seem to grasp the Mutant Massacre. Some of them seem to ignore, most of them seem to ignore entirely that Marrow was a terrorist. She was a villain. That was a thing that happened. She definitely was responsible for a lot of death, but whatever. I guess so was Wolverine, right? Just harp that line. Okay, X-Men 87, continuing the story. The whole planet is in turmoil by now. And actually, I'm going to take another sip of water, speaking of turmoil. Astra seems to know about Kurt's background somehow. I don't know what that links to. She speaks German to him and mentions like he's grown up nicely or something like that. And it seems almost like a Mr. Sinister comment, but I have no idea what it relates to. Marrow attacks Magneto. They make it there. Marrow attacks Magneto, mentioning how he never helped the Morlocks. And this is interesting. He replies, "My hesitance to aid your people has long been a source of shame to me." Joseph ends up sacrificing himself to repair the damage to Earth in this dramatic sky beam that we will see referenced again. Magneto, this event is not important in and of itself for Marrow, really, but it does get brought up later in what we're covering for Marrow. So that's what that means. We'll see this whole event referenced again. Magneto and Xavier acknowledge that neither one is going to stop ever. S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up, and Magneto, surprisingly, at the end, is given the right to rule over Genosha. And Huxley had a kind of a hand in this. So, once again, Davis and Nicieza, it's neat to see that Magneto regrets his leadership during the Mutant Massacre. He was leading the X-Men at that time. But this entire story was just much bigger than what we're focused on, or really even what I cared about. If you haven't gotten that impression yet, I told you there were high highs. I get pumped for those. I love to talk about those. The low lows are like, meh, skip through them. And I should mention, if I haven't mentioned already, though I think I have, I said I've been working on this off and on for over a year. And there are so many other comics that I had to read to be able to understand these. Like, remember when I was talking about Dark Beast and trying to figure out, is that really him at the end of the issue or not? I had to do a lot of reading that I'm not talking about in these videos in order to understand what's happening in these videos. I had to read, or shouldn't say I had to read, it was a pleasure to read, but it took a long time to work through it and untangle it. Things about the Mutant Massacre, but also like Mikhail, and who is he, and how does his power work, and how does this all fit together? I had to read the entire Age of Apocalypse event, which I genuinely there were some high points, I guess, but it just did not interest me at all. But I needed it for background. And so there's a lot of these stories that maybe if I wasn't so tired of reading the stories, I would have been they would have been more enjoyable. But I just didn't care about some of these plots, and I still don't. If it wasn't for Marrow, I wouldn't be talking about it. But whatever. So that's kind of the end of the Magneto War story. So we're going to switch gears a bit and move over to Peter Parker Spider-Man, issue number 4. And so this is not the first time we've seen Spider-Man. I really like the cover. The buildings are kind of curved like a walleye lens to kind of frame the characters, and I don't know. I think it's a cool cover. So we open with a couple who are together, and they're like out alone, and for some reason standing really dangerously close to an open sewer grate with a manhole pulled back. But anyway, the man ends up getting pulled down into the sewers. His name is Jeff, I believe. It seems to be becoming a regular thing. Like it makes the headlines of the paper, and J. Jonah Jameson is approached by a senator about it. Peter and Betty are assigned to go investigate, but Peter ends up getting knocked out. His spider sense is going off, but he's not sure where that's coming from. And then he ends up getting knocked out before he can solve it, and Betty gets abducted. Over at the mansion, Marrow is upset, and she's reading the paper, and she sees the headlines about this sewer abductions, right? So she's upset, and she's concerned about what might happen if people start snooping around the tunnels. The remaining Morlocks might end up getting in trouble, right? And Storm tells her, this is so interesting. Again, different writers and the way they handle this stuff. Storm tells her she's not a Morlock anymore. and says they need a plan. She says, quote, "I know this turn of events is upsetting, Marrow, but you are not a Morlock any longer. You are part of the X-Men and..." Morrow interrupts. "I'm a mutant, Storm, just like you, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Rogue, and Wolverine," which are all of the X-Men that are there, but because this is a Spider-Man issue, it's like they have to introduce all the characters in the panel, right? Just like those people, just like the Morlocks. "But you and I both know that the Morlocks ain't so pretty to look at. If any Upworlders go hunting around those tunnels we lived in, they're going to tumble onto the few surviving Morlocks, and then there's going to be blood spilled." And Storm says, "And you want to ensure that it is not Morlock blood. I sympathize, Sarah, but remember what happened the last time you ran off into the tunnels. You and Archangel were nearly killed by the Abomination," which was a great issue. We talked about it. So Flash Thompson, who is dating Betty, blames mutants, kind of like carte blanche, all of them, and vows to go into the tunnels and search for her. J. Jonah Jameson tells Peter to let the story be. Just drop it. But Peter and Marrow, so it's kind of cool because it's like a split page. And Peter, I guess he's not supposed to be Spider-Man anymore. Mary Jane seems to indicate that. Maybe she says, I think, leave it to the other Spider-Man or something. Again, I don't know what else was going on. But presumably this is one of those many times where Peter was like, I'm done being Spider-Man. And so he's supposed to be resting. And then, of course, Marrow was told, you need to wait for the X-Men to come up with a plan. But then there's this like double panel where they're both sneaking out while the other people, like Storm is awake reading a book and Marrow's like creeping by in the background, and then Mary Jane and Aunt May, or maybe it's who is the other lady with them? Mary Jane, Aunt May, and then there was someone else. Anyway, some other woman, but like they're like watching TV and Peter's like creeping by in the background. Like they're both sneaking out. It's just really cool panel or page. So they're both sneaking out of their houses to attend to this whole situation, right? And while that's happening, those people who are watching TV were hearing over the report that there's a crowd gathering against mutants in the tunnels. And it's kind of like at one of the entrances to the tunnels. Marrow and Pete, as Spider-Man, are sneaking out of the house. They get there, Flash incites the mob, and they prepare to charge into the tunnels, but Marrow confronts them. And she says, "The name is Marrow. I'm one of those mutants you all seem so anxious to meet. No human enters these tunnels alive." Probably work on your PR skills a little bit, Marrow, but that's okay. A battle almost starts, but Spidey steps in. An officer nearby suggests that Spider-Man resolve the situation quick, and Marrow says she's going to find and kill the thing. I want to mention, because I don't think I put it in my notes, but when I was rereading this, he remarks on her speed, by the way. Spider-Man does. When we talk about kind of like how her powers are evolving and what they are, she's got really good reflexes. And strength, but I think we're going to cover that in the next video a little bit more. We'll have a conclusion video that wraps up everything. Anyway, so the suggestion is made that Spider-Man like calms things. Marrow says she's going to go into the tunnels herself, find and kill this monster or whatever. And then when she's in the tunnels, she's tracking with her smell. She says, well, like the thing says sniff, sniff, but it's comics, right? So she's smelling. She says, "Callisto, my friend, you were here recently. Your scent is fresh." So she's got the enhanced olfactory senses. As always, she tells Spider-Man that she bets she can pass, or he bets, sorry, I've written it wrong in the recap here. She says to Spider-Man that she bets that he can pass for an Upworlder under his mask and can't understand her. And they hear a cry and they investigate before they're able to talk too much. And they eventually find all the missing people down in a large area. And she says this, "I was born down here. I grew up in these tunnels, and yet I have never seen this place. I don't care about Upworlders. My only concern is for Callisto. She is everything to me. Teacher, mentor, friend." So there's this big room. She says she's never been there. Sure, different writers, whatever. But she does say that she was born down here, which is interesting considering what we read in Cat and Mouse, right? Where we were talking about the romance novel, and I said, oh, maybe she was born down here, maybe she wasn't. Now we have a little bit of canon confirmation. But all of the people who are kind of laid out and tied up, she finds Callisto among them. And Callisto tells her that there are other Morlocks who are being held captive that are tied up and around. And that the whole thing actually started with the Morlocks, like this creature, person, thing, whatever was hunting them first. And the villain ends up revealing himself, and his name is Hunger. And he's like some kind of vampire, sort of like Morbius, I guess. But he has like vampire powers-ish. So the three of them fight. Spidey trying to convince Marrow not to go for the kill, but Hunger grabs them both. And then Flash Thompson shows up. So when Flash Thompson shows up, he says something and Hunger drops Spider-Man. Marrow tries to get Spider-Man to break off one of her bones, which he does, and to stake Hunger through the heart, which he doesn't. Spidey suspects he isn't actually a vampire after all, and then Hunger escapes in an energy beam, like vampires do. He escapes in this energy beam, but there are bats that like trail him out, but it like busts up through the street and into the sky. Hunger wasn't really the focus of this issue. Marrow says, quote, "I don't understand. Why would this human, Flash Thompson, risk his life for... He was out there with the rest of them. I don't understand." And Spidey simply responds to her, "Because he's only human. You've got a lot to learn about us Upworlders, lady. A real lot." And then the issue closes. We see Senator Ward is glad that the pair failed and that he wants to recapture Hunger. So there's more stuff going on. It's kind of a one-shot cameo with Marrow, really. There's kind of 3 writing credits, Mackie, Sears, and Hannah. And it's always nice to see Spidey and Marrow together. I love... Both characters are so visually dynamic. Like, they're really... they flow, like, visually. And so it's really neat to see the artists kind of have them contrasted. Even in the even in the cover, there's kind of this tension between the two of them, visual tension. Like I said, with like the walleye curved buildings, it's I like it. It's a very dynamic depiction. Action panels. So the action panels here are flowing really well, even though the artwork is sometimes janky, but that's what we're used to. It's interesting to see how these one-shots treat Marrow in the sense of what was clearly seen as important or not about the character. So presumably these people have to like ask permission to have certain characters in their issues. And so they're probably given like a briefing on the things they can say and can't say. And so it's always neat to kind of like infer what was considered to be important and established and what was considered to be up for grabs. Like the being born in the sewers, for instance. That's a pretty big revelation. But then again, fans of the X-Men and fans of Marrow probably would have assumed that anyway at that point. So that's kind of more for the Spidey readers. I don't know. Anyway, Marrow also comments in this issue that she was born in the tin. Yeah, I just saw that. Oh, right. And I thought it was interesting because it might be metaphorical, right? Too, even if it's not literal, which it probably is literal, but there's that metaphor of being born in the tunnels, because the name of this issue is Beneath It All. And so there's just this kind of cool tension there. Anyway, good issue. Moving on to X-Men Unlimited, number 23. It's called Lessons. You see the cover there. You see Marrow featured prominently on the cover. And by prominently, I mean her head is at least in the box. We open up with Marrow. She is apparently late for a Danger Room session. She's upset at Xavier. She's like right in his face with a bone dagger. She's mad because he like contacted her telepathically. And Nightcrawler is there. He kind of intercedes and breaks them up. But Marrow says, "Oh yeah, what makes you think I even want to be anything like the rest of you?" And Kurt burns her back with, "You'd probably have returned to the Morlock tunnels if you didn't." It's like, ooh, yeah, zing, you're still there. And it's revealed that Xavier is kind of being a jerk. His recent behavior is a concern to some of the other mainline characters. In fact, actually, it's the ones that are on the cover there who are most concerned and confront him, but whatever. Rab, R-A-A-B, is writing here, and we have seen that name before. The chronology here with these issues gets a little bit wonky in terms of when they were published. It was hard for me. Sometimes the dates that you find are publishing dates, and some of them are the cover dates, which don't always match up. And sometimes the sources don't list which is which. So I kind of had to do a little bit of arranging here, which made sense, but it's not necessarily month by month correct. But so here we have Marrow. She's feisty, but there's nothing else in the issue. Now we switch to an issue of Gambit. Number 7, he's got his own title. This is Nicieza, who is writing with someone else who we've not seen, Scroge. And the only point that's relevant here is Gambit has a flashback of him rescuing Sarah. And she has bone protrusions from her face. And Sabretooth is there. And the Marauders, and Gambit says, he said, kidnap them, study them, figure out what makes mutants tick. And there's some hint about Remy's future that involves both Sinister and Apocalypse. So there's just this little nod to remind people that Gambit is the one who rescued Sarah, and that Sinister kind of had some stuff going on. So we've seen Nicieza before. We haven't seen this Skroce. It's Skroce. And there's nothing much here. It's just kind of like whatever needs to happen. Marrow is just kind of a supporting threat, so to speak, in Gambit's story. Uncanny X-Men 368. Huxley from the UN that gave Magneto the island, she didn't really give it. She's not in charge of the UN, right? But she used to be on Genosha, and so she kind of had some authority and ideas, and she ends up being the one who presents it to him. So Huxley has Xavier's old job at the UN. She's a consultant on genetic mutation. And it was listed in, last time we saw her, it was actually said that she was in Genosha for 18 months. So like she had been in Genosha for a while. So she has a lot of experience with Genosha and with mutants, though it's not revealed that she's a mutant herself or anything like that. The whole team together is lamenting the loss of Joseph, and Marrow complains about her itchy clothes, which are black slacks, a white collared shirt with sleeves that flare out at the wrists, a black vest with buttons, and a tie. And I'm going to put a picture in here. Editing BW is going to put in a picture now. So a green alien stranger suddenly appears, interrupting an argument between Wolverine and the Professor at the end of the issue, and everybody else is there too, and abducts the entire team and brings them to a place that they know instantly isn't Earth. It looks very other dimensional or something like that. So this issue is Davis and Casey who are doing the writing. Davis is on the story, Casey's on the script. Marrow's funeral outfit that we saw the picture of is only seen in that one panel, really. Even so there's, if I recall, there's like 4 shots of Marrow in this issue. The first one is when she's on the stairs, the picture that I showed you. The second is just her face as she's talking. The third is when they're outside at the funeral, she's in the background and they gave her blonde hair. And then the fourth is a little insert, and it looks like they weren't sure whether her sleeves were bare sleeves or like, it looks like her shoulder is the same skin tone as her face. So why not, right? In a broader sense, though, so now this is the last issue we'll cover. In a broader sense, this marks the end, or the beginning of the end, of this incarnation of Marrow. Her powers were fleshed out a bit more, and her background was explained or retconned as needed. Not for the last time that we'll see that. There were some great stories, like the one we opened with, Cat and Mouse, and some less than great ones, like many of the others in this video. Overall, though, this is really, it's a decent attempt at doing something with a character, even if I have my own reservations about some things. I have in my notes, our girl was never going to be a frontline face anyway. So we're going to call this the Davis era Marrow. We had the Kelly era Marrow. Now this is the Davis era Marrow, because she is about to be rebooted again. So we will have more videos to come. I struggle with where to break these up, and I anticipate that it's going to take me longer, largely because it has taken me so long to get here, but because I know the issues so well. The thing that takes me the longest is actually just finding the pictures to put into the video, and just updating my notes before I make the video itself. So thanks for watching, for all those who've been kind of following along. As always, if you have thoughts, questions, comments, observations, you can put those in the comments, and I'll get back to you, or we can try to find it. And as I said last time, if you have any connection or know of any connection to any of these people involved, I would love to hear from them, and reach out and have a little interview. I don't know how many people are interested in Marrow these days, but I imagine there's some. I'm getting some views on these videos, and I'm certainly one. So if there's any connections out there, I'd love to reach out to those people. But at any rate, we'll bring this video to a close. Thanks so much for watching again. I'll see you next time. Excelsior.